we had a great question come in about the obliques, the oblique muscles, and triangle pose. So this was the question, and Carla asked this question. Jenny, I encourage students to keep activation in the top side obliques by not turning the chest downward, sometimes suggesting they keep the hand there as they reach forward to feel the activation. And if the area softens as they reach toward the earth, they have lost the activation. Is this a true statement? So that's kind of part one of her question. And then she says, you have likely heard the cue of staying between two panes of glass in triangle. I don't use that cue, but I love the feeling of engaging and working the obliques to avoid the quote love handles I am fighting against as I age. Am I causing any injurious harm? I am loving this course. It feels like Mythbusters. So it's a great question. I'm so glad Carla asked about this. And I feel like it's kind of a two-part question. Part one is in triangle pose, if you let the chest turn toward the floor and don't stay side facing, do the obliques like stop working? Do they deactivate? And then part two is she causing any inherent injuries in her students by asking them to turn to face the side? Because we probably know that in the yoga world, there's kind of this controversy around this common cue we hear for triangle pose, which is to feel like you're aligning your body between two panes of glass. Okay, so let's just talk about the obliques first. So the obliques are, kind of like side waist muscles and also toward the front. We have a couple sets of them. We have external obliques and internal obliques. And generally, the obliques, they rotate our spine. So they rotate, they side bend us, they laterally flex. So they have multiple roles. And they also flex the spine. They also round the spine along with the rectus abdominis, which is like that, your six-pack muscle along the front. So they have multiple roles. So we're talking about the obliques in triangle pose specifically. And we know a triangle pose is a side-facing frontal plane pose. And if we're going to be targeting any obliques in triangle pose, it is the top side waist obliques, just like Carla said in her question. It's not the bottom side waist, it's this side waist. Gravity, is pushing down on us, and gravity wants, like if we were not working these muscles, then we would do this. We would like C curve down. We would laterally flex toward the floor. But instead, these muscles, the obliques on the top side, they work to lift us up and hold us here. Although I do need to qualify this a bit, because if we have our bottom hand down in triangle pose, which is traditional in the pose, like usually we have the hand down on the floor, a shin, a prop like a block. If the hand is down, that really reduces the ability for the obliques to really be working very much, because when the hand is down, we can pretty much just like the arm supports our weight. And then this top side obliques, they're not really needed to hold us up so much because we have the arm posted there to hold us up. Now, it's none of this is like black or white. We're totally on, totally off. But typically, traditionally, if the hand is down, these muscles are not really working that much. But if you were to hover this hand, then that could be a progression of triangle pose. And then you're no longer like supporting yourself or propped up by this arm. And now without that, then these muscles definitely do have to work more, because now this is what's holding you here. Whereas before the arm was kind of holding you up. So without the hand, these do work more. With the hand down, they don't work very much. And of course, there can be some nuance and gray area there. Like you certainly could practice or teach a triangle pose where you really invite students to be like light on this arm, like maybe they're up on fingertips and you say like, be as light as you can on your fingertips, like maybe so that they could almost leave the floor. But then it's kind of like, well, that's kind of not that much different than just lifting your hand, like it's adding the progression that way. But you could certainly add cues and suggestions like that. And if you did that, then triangle pose would be a little more targeting for the top side waist. But traditionally with the hand down, and if we're kind of, letting the arm bear some of our weight, then that's going to reduce the work of the top side waist, the obliques. But let's just talk about, if we really were wanting to work these, so maybe we either didn't have the hand down or we were being really light on the hand. So then what's up with what Carla was asking about, which was like side facing versus letting the chest, roll toward the floor a bit, because we know this is kind of a common presentation we'll see in some students is this rather than totally aligned facing the side. So I think that Carla is correct in thinking that keeping a side facing torso does invite the obliques to work more. And again, of course, this is all assuming we're not leaning on the arm. Either the hand is up or we're just really bearing very little weight on the arm. The more we face to the side, the more we keep the chest facing this way, the more the obliques would work, but in their lateral flexion role. Because remember, the obliques can rotate, but they can also laterally flex us. So in triangle pose, they are working the top side obliques, like if we're not, leaning on that arm, they're working isometrically, and it's in their lateral flexion role to hold us here. But if we do, kind of let the chest turn down a little bit, just for whatever reason, the student doesn't realize or whatever. But if this is happening a bit, it's not technically the case that the obliques suddenly stop working. It's not that in the side facing, they're active and then here they're not active. It's more just that if we started to turn our chest down, the obliques are still working here. I mean, again, we're all saying they're working if you're not bearing weight on the arm, but they could potentially still be working, but it would be more in their rotational role, because at that point you've actually turned. Now the spine is rotated. So the obliques would be working to hold you here in space, to keep you, from rotating further. So they're like holding you here, but more in the rotational role. So I wouldn't suggest that letting the chest turn toward the floor in triangle would turn off the obliques or deactivate them. They're just working in a different sense. But if you keep that side facing alignment, then they are working more, again, if you're not leaning into the arm, but it's in the lateral flexion, their lateral flexion role. And we probably all know this if you were to feel this in your body. Carla is totally correct to think that we would want to, if we're interested in targeting the top side obliques and getting them to work, they would work more if you were side facing, because they're working against more resistance in this plane of motion, in this relationship to gravity. They have more that they're working to hold up than if we were turning down a little bit. But they're still working here. They're just working a little bit less. So they're still like on. They're still activated, again, if you're not leaning into the arm, but they'd be working more if you were completely side facing. So I think it's totally fine. And like Carla was asking about, if you're really interested in targeting the top side obliques, it makes sense to really try to encourage that students stay in that frontal plane alignment and keep the chest side facing. And then, because I mentioned from the beginning that triangle pose, especially with the hand down, is not really the best. Like, we can certainly a little bit activate here, but it's not super significant in terms of actually loading muscle and like working that muscle close to momentary muscular failure to actually stimulate strength adaptations. So, we could use triangle pose to tune into this area and to feel it work. We could also bring in some of the progressions I talked about in the video. Like if we hover the hand, then this works more. If we reach an arm and maybe both arms forward, now we've lengthened the levers that these muscles are working against, and now they work a lot more. Like something like this definitely has more potential to actually work these muscles to or close to momentary muscular failure. And that could be successful for really like strength building and quote toning or muscle growth. So progressions like this could be good, but just regular triangle pose, especially with the hand down, probably not the best for really strengthening right here. But there is kind of a cool triangle pose variation that sometimes I teach that really does like target the top side waist in kind of a unique way. And I just want to show it to you because we're on this topic of the obliques and triangle pose. But I think that this is kind of cool. So you can be in triangle, then you can instruct one hand behind the head. And then for students who are interested in going a little further, they could bring the other hand behind their head. So I know In the triangle pose video, I talked about arms forward as a progression, but here it's hands behind the head. And now we will add dynamic movement. So then we would bring that bottom elbow down like towards, say, the bottom knee. And then we would lift up and maybe even up higher than where we started. And then we arc down, curve the elbow down toward the knee, and then lift up, reach the elbow like up toward the ceiling. And so here, this is really nice because this is targeting these muscles, those obliques, but in a dynamic way through movement. And if you like had reached this arm, then you would be targeting them more because there's a longer lever. So this would be even more. But this is a really, my voice is even getting a little shaky as I'm saying it. This is a really nice way to actually target this area for strength in a shape that's similar to triangle pose. But if the obliques are an area of interest, where we actually want to build some strength and maybe some muscle growth, I think side plank is maybe a better choice than triangle pose because we load the obliques more in this pose. Here it changes. It's not the top side obliques, it's the bottom side obliques versus triangle where it was the top side obliques. But here there's a much longer lever length, especially from the obliques all the way down to the foot, so they're really having to work a lot to suspend us here in space. If these guys were not working, gravity would take us down, it would curve the spine, it would laterally flex us, but instead these muscles work to hold us here. And there's a lot more load and a lot more resistance they're working against in side plank than in traditional classic triangle pose. So side plank would be a good pose to practice if targeting the side waist, the obliques, were of interest. And then just for our movement eyes and education, I just wanted to throw out one other idea. This is strength training world, but I find that when we look at strength exercises and adding a weight, it can just be really helpful. Like when we see a weight and the way that that applies load to the body, it's a little more obvious than when we're just talking like body weight and yoga poses and their relation to gravity. So I like this exercise if one were open to strength training where you hold a weight in one hand. And you could just stand here. And what is happening here is gravity wants to pull the weight down. And so that would be this opposite side obliques. They would work isometrically just to hold you here. So you've added a load that's targeting this opposite side waist. And you could like walk around. That would be a single hand carry. That's like what that would be called in the strength world. But what I really wanted to show is that what I like to do is hold the weight and let the weight then pull me down with control. This is a side bend. And then use these muscles to pull yourself back up. So this is dynamic and this is moving through more of a full range of motion. We laterally flex down, but it's these muscles we're targeting. And then these muscles work to lift us back up and restack the spine. So you could just hold still, hold statically, and this would isometrically target the side waist, or you could add dynamic movement. And that's a really nice strength exercise. We don't tend to see it that often, but it is a strength exercise. It's just a standing side bend with weight. I hope this helped us just like understand a little bit more about the obliques and their role and how we could think about them in triangle pose and alignment within triangle pose.